Alright, everyone, that should do it. That should take us live. Here we are with perhaps the final of our single day 2-game slates for some time. Hopefully, in the postseason, there is some extended amount of 2-day slates where we manage to get multiple games on a slate with some sort of decent prize support. On a 2-day slate from the sites. They have run them intermittently over the last couple weeks, but usually not putting as many prizes behind them. I hope they at least step up that ratio so that if the main showdown has $400 or $500 plus $1,000 in prizes, they think about throwing $100 at the 2-game slate. I would try to even balance them out, but that's a whole separate thing. But we have the 2 games this evening. 1 tomorrow, 0 on Saturday, taking the day off, and on Sunday 1 to 3, depending on how this evening's contests progress. Obviously, we have the 76ers and the Trailblazers pushed to the brink of elimination. Some good news for those of you who, I guess some bad news for those of you who are looking forward to seeing less of me, but somehow still follow the show. It looks like I will probably do some shorter live before locks leading up to the 1-game slate. So I will continue to do more shows. For a while it had appeared as if I was only going to be on when there was greater than 1 game on a day. It appears that that is actually not the case, and working on the exact details, but certainly hopeful that going forward for the remainder of the playoffs will certainly continue to have me out here doing even for the 1-game slates. I will show up and give some content every day, and hopefully that'll be useful because it seems like a very good idea for no other reason than the prize pools are still very significant. I think I saw earlier today that the 2 sites had main contests in the showdowns of $555,000 and $400,000, and those are obviously still pretty massive prize pools. Not for the showdowns, rather, but for the 2-game slate today. And on the single days, they've been pretty significant as well. I presume the $2.5 million contest that they're running on the first day of the finals on DraftKings will be a single-game slate, so maybe go a full hour on that day and break down some of that information, but very possibly back tomorrow, and even if not, frequently for the duration of these playoffs. Yesterday was tough, as a lot of people alluded to. Again, first game turning into a massive blowout. Second game, Durant getting injured. There was obviously a lot of randomness in the air, but certainly guys I like did not perform, with both Kyrie Irving and Brook Lopez putting up really, really shitty games, even by their already significantly lowered standards. I certainly had some hope that Kyrie wasn't going to go out like that, and for his brand and his ego, or for whatever the hell, would go out there and put forward his maximum effort. And maybe that was his maximum effort, and if so, that is a sad state of affairs. But we have moved on from that series, so let's go ahead and talk about this evening's 2-game slate. So I got lucky a couple times the day before yesterday. The first way I got lucky was for the first day, I did not hang my hat on Kawhi Leonard. I said that I'd play him in all the cash. I said that I had him in FanDuel and GPPs, but in the single DraftKings GPP lineup I had constructed, Kawhi Leonard did not show his face for the first time. That turned out to be marginally correct. It wasn't like having Kawhi Leonard was really bad for you in any way. It was a particularly low-scoring slate. Both the games blew out on that slate, but was the best time to do that, so got very, very lucky there. He was not historically efficient for the first time in the series. 7 for 16 from the field is human. Missed all his 3-pointers. Picked up enough peripherals, got the double-double again, contributed a little more across those categories, and so still managed to put up an absolutely fine number. and not an incredibly difficult situation for me. I again am hanging my hat on Jokic over Kawhi from any raw point standpoint. I still like him a little bit more points per dollar, although it's fairly close. And I still like him massively more than Joel Embiid. We'll start by talking about that. But pretty simply, I'll go with the case for Embiid first. The case for Embiid is we've already seen him have a massive game this series. There is a chance in a there is no tomorrow closeout game situation for Philadelphia. They play Joel Embiid 40 minutes, and even in a tough matchup, Joel Embiid can score 70 fantasy points in 40 minutes, and it becomes a question of ownership. If my man's going to be 12% owned, I'm going to like having some Joel Embiid. If he's going to be 30% owned, that's probably too much for me, and then the point of equilibrium lies somewhere between those two numbers. But from any raw point standpoint, playing him over Lillard, Kawhi, Jokic, it doesn't make any sense for me. And there's a number of reasons for this, but I'll just focus on the first two because, again, we've done all these games many times over. The first is he's obviously not super healthy, and I project him to play fewer minutes than all those other players we just named. But I guess three reasons. I think it's unlikely he plays more minutes than Lillard, Jokic, those other guys. And that should factor into your math somewhat. We've seen 35 out of him this series. Maybe you get 38 or something. But I'm not surprised if the number on... I would still project Jokic north of that. I would project Kawhi north of that. So that is a factor. And the second is, again, that he's just not healthy, whether it's gastroenteritis or the knees or what have you. I would be surprised if he's out there at 100% today. Difficult to quantify that, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and I would still have some concern with deploying him. And the third is that in the last game, for the first time, Nick Nurse did something that I and everyone else who pays attention had been yelling at him to do for the entire series, which is they basically shadowed him with Marc Gasol. And that's enough for me. That's just too much. Could it still come out? Of course it could still come out. I just think the odds are less likely relative to the ownership. And that's really, whenever you're talking about a single lineup or your particular matrix of players, if you're building some massive lineups, it just comes down to, does it make sense with the ownership? And based on the likelihood that he hits a super ceiling versus the previously mentioned guys, or CJ McCollum, or Enes Kanter, or Jimmy Butler or Tobias Harris, it's just the math doesn't work out right for me at the salary and the ownership. But again, if you look at this last game, Embiid started the game, came out at 644, came back in at 410. Marc Gasol started the game, came out at 549, and I believe came back in roughly concurrently, and came back at 410 at the exact same whistle as Embiid. So the game blew out, again, as I alluded to, but Embiid ended up with something like a minute out of his 31 minutes on the court where he wasn't facing up against Marc Gasol. And that's just one additional factor for me. Could he only play 34 minutes, spend 32 minutes of them against Marc Gasol and still put up 55 fantasy points, and the other guys in that price range / position fail? Sure. But it's just the math doesn't work out as far as his ownership and salary for me being heavily exposed to Joel Embiid. Also got very, very lucky on Danny Green. Again, start of the series being cheap, people not knowing how it would grade out, I guess. His ownership is really significant in the 40s, dropped to the 30s, dropped down to the 20s. Finally getting him under 20%, still at a reasonable price. Last game was the first time I pulled the trigger, so to speak, and he went off and had his best game of the series and had 30-something. I probably am going to try to move away today. I would rather play certainly Will Barton. I would rather play other guys in his price range than him. I still have him projected for 21 fantasy points. The price at 49 and 44 is no longer so brilliant, so obviously nothing wrong on a 2-game slate with playing Danny Green, but more inclined to move away. I like Serge Ibaka to play 28 minutes. That's a little less than I had him projected for last game, and a little less than he played in the game before that. But last game, you have to do some investigation here because Siakam took an elbow from, I think it was from Kawhi, and left for a significant period of time in the first half, and then the game blew out, so that muddled the minutes a little bit. But I do think the most likely occurrence, again, in any sort of reasonably close contest is very minimal bench contribution from the likes of Fred VanVleet and Norm Powell, who I have at, I think, 11 and 8 minutes respectively, and them leaning on their starters. I was talking about Ibaka. I said Ibaka took the elbow from Kawhi. I'm talking about Ibaka here. I like Ibaka. I'm pretty sick. I might have misspoke. But I was attempting to say, and maybe did not, that Ibaka took an elbow from Kawhi Leonard, and that cost him some minutes in the first half. But I have him at 28 here. Wouldn't surprise me if you see 32, 33, 34. Wouldn't surprise me if it falls under. So I do think there is some variability in these numbers, but I appear to be more confident than most people. Again, this is a matchup with Philadelphia where they really can afford to play extremely big. So you can play a 6-man rotation with 4 front court members, basically, and then throw some minutes at Norm and Fred and try to grind that game out. But yeah, I'm. It's going to be, weird situations, or there's FanDuel exceptions for getting outside those core 6 for Toronto. As a minimum priced point guard punt, Fred VanVleet makes some sense. You're probably running 2 or 3 punts tonight. There's certainly some logic to it if you were forced to make a generality with the fact that as these games go later in and as the starters play more minutes and as the bench players play less minutes, it certainly ends up mathing out that way a little bit more, that you want to be a little bit more stars and scrubsy and trying to get your hands on 45 minutes of Lillard or Kawhi or Jokic or what have you. As far as the 76ers go, felt good about talking about Mike Scott before the last show, that I thought as he recovered a little more from his injury, and more importantly, as Greg Monroe continued to struggle. He had real difficulties, kind of on both ends of the court, but certainly on the defensive end of the court. I think they like the spacing and the other things that Mike Scott does for them, and he's probably, certainly to me, still a net positive on the defensive end. So even not playing in the fourth quarter, which I think he does if this game wasn't... this game is a massive blowout. They won by, I think it was 36. So you had, blowout guys coming in really early, like 9 minutes to go in the fourth. You got T.J. McConnell and Jonathan Simmons and those guys. So I think Mike Scott very possibly closes that game. So if I'm looking at the value guys from this team, setting aside J.J. Redick, for me, Ennis is still absolutely just fine to go to. I think he probably is in 25 or 26 again. But Mike Scott, who had played 12 or 13 minutes in the 2 previous games, after returning from his issues, did go up to 17 and some change in the last game, I think. I would expect to see that continue. So if you're in the showdown slates and you're looking in that, low 2s, I'm not sure where his price is, high 1s, as far as price guys, Mike Scott would be the guy on the 76ers I would have some interest into going there for. Looking at the rest of the team for a second, we didn't get the. It was a pretty bad game, even in the massive blowout. Jimmy Butler performed again, and he's obviously been really, really good and driven this team. And I do think that is largely an artifact of the matchups, and I have no particular reason to expect it to stop today. Now the price is up even more. He's sitting around 8K on DraftKings. He's sitting at exactly 8K on DraftKings and a touch under 10 on FanDuel. So that price is starting to get a little bit sticky, but he's still, for any points per dollar look at the situation, at $8,000, I still have him projected for 48 fantasy points, and that feels pretty good. He exceeded 50 in the 3 previous games. He played over 40 minutes in 2 of them. That can certainly still work out either side of them have no issue with you playing any amount of Jimmy Butler. But it's really interesting. If you talk DraftKings or FanDuel, he projects really similarly to me as far as points per dollar ownership, wanting to have exposure to Damian Lillard, who's only $800 more on DraftKings, where he costs you $8,800 as opposed to costing you $8,000 flat. And on FanDuel, Damian Lillard is literally $300 cheaper than Jimmy Butler. So again, they're obviously playing different positions there. But I do have Lillard projected for about 6 more raw fantasy points. I think you get 45 plus minutes out of him here. I'm a pretty big fan of Damian Lillard tonight. I'm a fan of a lot of these guys, but as far as Lillard and McCollum goes, I really do want to have one. I expect them to see a really significant amount of time here. They've obviously, I was going to say moved away from the bench, but they've really moved away from a couple of the starters where we started to see even less time from Al-Farouq Aminu. I still haven't projected for north of 30 minutes, but I'm concerned. They have pushed small and just had enough defensive issues where they've kind of just said, okay, we're just going to run the shit out of this thing, which is similar to what Denver has done. It's been a really interesting series as everybody started running and then it got much more defensive and muddied up. Do I like Simmons at 7,400 on FanDuel? I do. Small forward on FanDuel is unusually robust today. Kawhi at 10.5 is obviously very much in play. I prefer Jokic for my prime spend up, but Kawhi is obviously in a fine spot. I like Tobias Harris at $7,600. I like him points per dollar per ownership. I like him generally a little more than playing Jimmy Butler. I like CJ McCollum more than playing Jimmy Butler for $2,300 less, I think it is. But small forward on FanDuel has those two guys at the top, and I'm fine with the double pay up, which I think gives you a pretty unique lineup. But the next 5 guys after that are in play. You have Kawhi at 10.5, Tobias Harris at 7.6, and then you have 5 guys nestled in between 41 and 4,600, being Harkless, Ennis, Redick, Hood, and Barton. I think all those guys are in play, so that's 7 guys at small forward on FanDuel on a 2-game slate. I don't hate, so it's actually a pretty sexy position there. I do have Barton projected a good bit above the others as far as raw points allocation. I have Barton, Redick, and then Hood a little bit above both Ennis and Harkless. Harkless is simply an artifact of the minutes. Lost a ton of time 2 games in a row to it's basically Rodney Hood and Seth Curry due to his continual foul troubles. This last game, he had a couple fouls in the first half. Early, never came back, didn't play in the second quarter, did another stint to start the third, never came back again to close, again in a blowout game. But, Harkless's minutes are really difficult to project here. Ennis is just more of a low upside guy. The floor is concerning, had literally whatever it was, 4 fantasy points in his last game. He had overperformed a little bit. A la Iguodala, a couple other guys we've spoken about recently, where I like James Ennis as a player, but even if he gets up to 25, 26 minutes, it's hard for me to project him for more than 20 fantasy points. And again, especially on FanDuel, you want those drops to have a low price, but you also want them to have a significant upside. You usually don't want your drops to be guys who are going to get you 15. You want them to be guys who are going to get you 5 to 30. So I generally prefer playing Barton or Hood or Redick, all of whom are carrying a better number. But generally there, as far as how much I want to play them for me, it's probably Barton, Redick, Hood, Harkless, Ennis. But that's small forward on FanDuel to answer your question. I pooped on Embiid again. He's going to make me look really dumb 10% of the time, kind of dumb 10% of the time, meh 20% of the time. Make me look pretty good like 60% of the time. Again, he's not healthy. They've started mirroring him with Marc Gasol. It just does not project out. It just does not math as nearly as good of a play as the other spend-up options. He costs basically the same thing as Kawhi, who I have for like 14 more fantasy points. It's really hard for me to go there. I like Harris a lot on DK. I look at him more as a sort of a Jimmy Butler pivot. This isn't a team I want to overexpose myself to. I don't mind Mike Scott off the bench in any format if he happens to work into your lineup and he ends up being largely unrelated to the other players on this team. It doesn't matter whether you have him or not. There are guys with whom he has more positive or negative correlation, whether you're talking about Tobias Harris or Joel Embiid, but he's cheap enough that on a 2-game slate, you sort of ignore Mike Scott for what I'm about to say, which is I like having a 76er. I don't want more than 2. I think you can play Ben Simmons in tournaments. I brought his projection down like 10 from last series to this series, and I was still way too generous in that I had him in the mid to high 30s, and he's averaging like 30. So still, looking at this pretty significant 5-game sample size we have here, hasn't gotten close to justifying 7,400 on FanDuel or 6,600 on DraftKings. But that price and the continual low ownership, because he's just never gotten there, so the ownership just keeps falling off, and you're going to get 11% owned Ben Simmons, and again, him getting 45 in this game if he plays 40 minutes and he can pick up some defensive stats, it certainly would not shock me, so I'm just fine with Ben Simmons in tournaments. Generally, I'm fairly ambivalent for Simmons, Butler, Harris. Butler is the best from a raw point standpoint, especially at the DK price. When you compare it to the FanDuel prices, it's a little closer, but 8,000 on DK is just objectively a very, very good price for him. Now, there's a ton of guys who are objectively very, very well priced. And I don't think he's quite as safe as him. I like Jimmy Butler a lot. It's a good spot for him simply because so much usage is going to fall in his lap, and Kawhi is eating Ben Simmons' lunch, and it's just it makes sense that it's going this way. But he's still overperforming a little bit. Expecting to get an average of 50x out of him a game here is a little bit high. And again, while he at $8,000 is objectively very well priced, so is CJ McCollum at 68 and Damian Lillard at 88 and Kawhi Leonard at 95 and Jokic at 10-3 or 10-4 or whatever he was today. And just there's a lot of guys, and Tobias Harris at 64. So cash, yes, Butler is the guy you want to look at most there. As far as cash, it would definitely be Butler, Harris, Simmons. As far as tournaments go, I'm pretty similar. I don't have a strong preference between those 3 players. Simmons will be the lowest owned, for a good reason. But it's a 2-game slate, and I'm a fan of low owned, so no issue with that. I like Tobias Harris a little bit more, still saving you on DK $200 off Ben Simmons FanDuel, where obviously they have disparate positions. I think it's $200 more for Tobias Harris. But a large way around, and again, I'll answer some specific questions, but they all counting the ownership project in the same pocket for me, if you will. Harris, Butler, or Simmons, I like having 1. Generally dislike having 2. You can ignore Scott. You can ignore Redick, really, honestly. Redick I like quite a bit more on FanDuel at 43, where, that's you're into real, drop zone territory there, and he can, even in this matchup, get 30 pretty easily, so I like JJ Redick quite a bit there. Again, have him a little bit behind Barton as far as a raw point sensibility, but on FanDuel I have no issue with significant exposure to Redick, but Butler, Harris, Simmons, wherever you may wander amongst the triumvirate of those 3 players. Pretty big fan of having 1. 1 feels right to me. We used to talk about this all the time, more so on the main slate, where you would talk about the team and, the Hawks are playing the Suns. How many players do you think are in the, Hawks players are in the best possible lineup? And I was like, 1.5 is my way of saying, might be 2, might be 1. Those feel like the right choices. None feels unlikely nobody gets there. 3 feels unlikely 3 guys get there. 1 feels right for the 76ers. And certainly if you're playing one of the 4 heavily priced guys. Redick and a guy doesn't bother me. Scott and a guy doesn't bother me. Ennis and a guy doesn't bother me. But one of the big 4 there, and again, I still have the least interest in Embiid, although he does carry the most ginormous ceiling among them. And I really don't mind the play, because the ownership should be appropriately low. I didn't mention Kyle Lowry. It occurs to me. I believe I mentioned all the other substantive members of that team. He's fine. I imagine coming off, a very good game for him, with the continual more minutes for Pascal Siakam. I think I'm a little lower on him than the field. I think there is a real inherent floor when you go back to full use, maybe 38 minutes of Pascal Siakam, and he just tends to be deferential in that situation. But if he wants it, he can easily get it, and getting 45 out of him isn't shocking. And Kawhi Leonard is obviously priced to move at this point. Kyle Lowry is obviously priced to move at this point. So on DK, I'm a pretty big fan of finding the $400 to move to Jamal Murray. Even if I have Jokic, I'm generally going to want to play Jamal Murray a little bit more, but I'd still have exposure to Lowry. If that makes any sense. But I'm more interested in playing Pascal Siakam. On DK, I'm more interested in a vacuum in playing Jamal Murray. On FanDuel, with the tag for Murray up so high, I actually still have them pretty close, but I'm still a slightly bigger fan of Murray. But there, it's pretty much dead on and even go between those two guys. But yes, thank you for the reminder. I did. And again, it's partially an artifact of doing shows by myself. But one of the reasons, if I don't mention a guy, it's usually because I don't have much to say. It's usually like, that's a guy, it's fine if he's in tournaments, certainly wouldn't play him in cash, tends to be the case. So whenever there's a player of note who I happen not to mention in going through a game, it's usually because I don't have a whole lot to say. And, Kyle Lowry got Kev projected for about 34 fantasy points. Might get you up to like 45 or something. Should be safe for at least 25. Like a lot of guys in games today, you can certainly make an argument. Look, if you're telling me they're going to run a 6-man rotation and 4 of those guys are front court members, that's a lot of minutes for Kyle Lowry. It's a perfectly reasonable argument. Dude was going to play a buttload of time if they hadn't absolutely pushed the 76ers shit in that last game. I guess we have time for the obligatory mention of, build a narrative here. Try to have, if you have multiple value plays, their games add up to sort of common sense. So if you're going to play Malik Beasley, I like Mason Plumlee a little bit more. If you're going to play TJ McConnell, I like Jonah Bolden a little bit more. If you're going to just try to, make sense, I do think it is more likely that the 76ers get. And by the way, thanks to everyone on Twitter who crawled up my ass when they were up 2-1 about saying that I had the Raptors winning this game series in 6. That they should get the series, and it did favor them. But it was touch and go for a while. But a lot of people went snipe hunting on that for a couple days. But yeah, in general, certainly on DK and a little bit on FanDuel, bigger fan of Jamal Murray than Kyle Lowry. Gary Harris, dude's going to play 37, 40, 42, whatever the hell minutes, and just be out there a ton. Generally, I think you can come up with slightly better, cheaper punts on FanDuel, though anytime someone plays 40 minutes in a game, there's going to be just some inherent upside that can be achieved. So I have no issue with $5,800 Gary Harris on FanDuel. But again, he was $4,900 either last game or maybe the game before. I'm not sure if I'm carrying that on right. I would rather play McCollum. I would rather play Butler by a hair. Again, comparing guys at 6K and 10K is a little bit weird. I would rather Gary Harris than Danny Green. And the position is fairly thin. So he's certainly a cash play. Assuming you're not spending all the way up for Butler, and $9,800 for Butler feels a little bit dicey. Your cash plays are going to be CJ McCollum and Gary Harris most of the time. Sorry if I'm not as responsive as I normally am to questions. Just going to fight my way through talking about all the guys in the games and then catch up with everything. Again, thanks to everyone who's already loaded up some questions in the premium Slack. And if you are listening on the YouTube and are not yet an Osmo.com member, as the saying goes, what are you waiting for? And additionally, just go ahead and directly tweet your questions to me at FastEddieFear. So Jamal Murray, fan of, obviously coming off several, successful games and just maintaining a large role in this offense, and that's just got something to do with the fact that Gary Harris doesn't take a lot of shots, and Torrey Craig is still starting and doesn't take a ton of shots himself. I still think he's overperforming a little bit. I still have Jamal Murray for projected for less than 40, despite the fact that he's routinely exceeding that number. But he's still priced just fine for what you expect out of him. I assume Torrey Craig will still likely at least get the nominal start, at least at the 3 for this team for his defense. I am at 24 minutes right now. I can see that being 15 if Barton's playing halfway decent and they really seem to be loving him again. I can see that being 30 if he's banging down his threes and there's any foul trouble on Barton or Harris or anyone. So, Torrey Craig, very cheap. He's 38 on FanDuel, 34 on DraftKings. He can get you 35 in a GPP. We've seen it in the postseason where he had, a couple decent games already. I'm fine with it. Not something I would endorse. I would generally rather Malik Beasley if I'm shopping in that range, who is 200 less on DK and 100 more on FanDuel, I think it is. Little more likely he spikes an upside for you, and again, he's really only a tournament play, and in that situation you would want to try to spike that upside, so would probably rather play Beasley over Craig. Would rather points per dollar play Barton over either of them. Seems like his minutes are going to hold. I have him for 27 minutes right now. And again, like many teams, you're getting a strong minutes density where he's going to get his 20 whatever, Craig's going to get his 20 whatever, Jokic, Millsap, Harris, and Murray are going to get piles of time, and they've really started to close out Malik Beasley and Monte Morris a little bit. Monte Morris on the edge of playable on FanDuel, where he's the minimum. I'd actually prefer him there at 35 than 26, I think is the number on DraftKings, although he might be the best 26. I'd have to look. If someone's on the horns of that particular quandary, go ahead and send me a message, and I will look that up specifically. But there is a 11-minute floor there. Don't play Monte Morris and Jamal Murray. Probably try not to play Malik Beasley and Will Barton, just because Beasley's biggest path to success is Barton objectively failing. I would try to avoid. If I was going to set a rule, it would probably be no more than one of Craig, Barton, Beasley. No more than one of Morris, Murray. Yeah, I undersold Paul Millsap this series, and I thought I was nervous. I was after obviously the horrific round one. I was worried I was blowing too much hot air up his skirt, and that proved not to be the case. He's been great. Could talk about it for a while. He's doing lots of things here, but 80% of it is the fact that this is a defensively fairly woeful Portland front court, and it's not getting any better with their shift towards, well, alright, can't stop anyone anyway down there. F it, we'll just run 27 minutes of Rodney Hood and 26 minutes of Seth Curry, and yeehaw! Just try to outscore you. You're going to get your twos. We're going to try to get our threes. Is a bit of what it's turned into. So, FanDuel, I slightly... my voice is cracking like I'm 14. FanDuel at what I expect their ownership to be, I think I would slightly rather play Pascal Siakam at the discount. DraftKings... obviously, Pascal Siakam is still very much in play. I guess I didn't specifically talk about him for long, but he looked really good in the last game. And he's had more time to rest. I expect him to be close to, if not at, 100%. He's young, he's bouncy. These kids, they're, Gumby-esque. One of my favorite two Cameroonians in this game. I like Pascal Siakam a lot on both sites. On FanDuel, I would slightly rather play him over Millsap. I want to then play Jokic. I have more interest in that scenario in playing Mason Plumlee as a $4,400 punt on FanDuel, where there's some, direct leverage there that in the event Millsap gets in foul trouble, and now maybe Plumlee gets up to 24 minutes, and yippity-skippity, he's obviously a really good fantasy producer. So, again, I'm a fan of just trying to make sure you correlate these plays as well as possible. I don't have an issue in DraftKings, even in tournaments, in playing Murray, Millsap, and Jokic. They are all priced extremely well. I'm going to be wanting to ensure that I'm playing Lillard or McCollum at the very least and have some exposure coming back the other way, because while that scenario can still be good in the event both games remain competitive, the most likely way Millsap, Jokic, Murray works out for you, many of the scenarios in which that work out for you involve the first game turning into a shit show again. So in a single lineup, again, just, generally you want to, build sort of around, some sort of strategy. This is what I think happens. You want to play Monty Morris somewhere? No problem. Don't play Jamal Murray. And everything that ensues itself. Monty Morris quite possibly the guy in the league who most deserves a greater role in his team's playoffs rotation than he's had. He's been tremendous. Like, if you ask me to rank my backup point guards in the NBA right now, Monty Morris is like top 4. He's really, really good. Can you play Gary Harris and Barton together without Murray? Absolutely. You can probably play them together with Murray. They're just cheaper. Like, I'm saying you can play Millsap and Jokic. You can play Millsap and Jokic on FanDuel. And they're well more expensive. You're not trying to correlate 3 sort of backcourt members there between those guys. But Barton is just objectively well too cheap. And it depends what site you're talking about. But $4,300 on DK, that's a really cheap number. And there's a real chance with all the starters getting so much more time that it's a shit value night. So there's a chance that you get there with Barton getting 30, or you get there with Barton getting 22, and that's still being just the hell fine. You get nights where, Mirotic goes out and gives you 35 in his 24 minutes. That was unexpected. And you get nights where none of the value is good. So I don't have a problem playing those 3 guys, because you're spending under 7 on Murray, under 5 on Harris, and 4.3, assuming you're talking about DraftKings, on Will Barton. I love Jokic. I love Lamp. Just looking around the room. He's so good. Like, that's all the minutes. I don't know what to tell you. From game 1 of this series, people are like, Embiid or Jokic? And I'm like, I don't. It was the same, again, by start of the second round. There was a lot of Embiid or Jokic and Capella or Horford. And again, I think back to those heady days when Capella was higher owned than Horford for more money. It's like college. So much everywhere. Sorry. But it's just not in the... And again, they're pretty comparable players. I love them both. When he's on the court and he's healthy, Joel Embiid is probably a better basketball player than Nikola Jokic. And I'm a giant Jokic stan. But Jokic is a better offensive player. Embiid is a betterer defensive player. On a scale of 1 to 10, Nikola Jokic is... For his uniqueness and everything he does at his position and skill set and how much he can power a team, you can give me a 10 on Nikola Jokic. I won't fight you. I don't know if anyone gets a 10, like Kevin Durant gets a 10, whatever, but we'll call him a 9.5. Embiid is, I'll be conservative. We'll call Embiid an 8 offensively. That's probably conservative. He's pretty brilliant. I'm saying when he's healthy. But defensively, Jokic is a 5.5, and Embiid is a 9. So netting them out, Embiid, if he's healthy and plays as many minutes, is probably a better basketball player. Now, I'm taking Jokic there was a poll on Twitter the other day. You take Jokic or Embiid to start your team. I'm taking Jokic every day of the week and twice on Sunday because I think I get 5 years out of him. I'm not sure about Embiid. At the start of this year, there was a whole thing on Twitter with, if you could get them for a 5-year contract, rank your players in the NBA, and I had Embiid lowest of everyone I know, and this was at the beginning of the year where he was playing 38 minutes, playing back-to-backs, and was in the MVP conversation. I had him 25. People crawled up my ass. We'll see. How long do you think those knees are holding out? How many games of Jokic do I get in 5 years? 360? How many games of Embiid do I get? I don't know, and neither do you. Maybe 360. Maybe 160. I'm taking Jokic. Anyhow, nothing I like more than a good tangent and being able to talk about how smart I am, but we should get back to work here. Things. All right, so talk about the Trailblazers some more. It's hard for me not to like Damian Lillard a lot. I like him more on FanDuel, where he's just too cheap at $9,500. There is a gigantic upside here. A gigantic upside. I do not have him projected as well points per dollar as Jokic, Kawhi, several of the other top plays. But I like Damian Lillard quite a bit because the minutes obviously could and should be massive, and there is a real chance, he just throws down a beating and takes over. CJ McCollum is exactly $2,000 less on both sites. I prefer CJ McCollum points per dollar. For those $2,000, I have Lillard getting you almost exactly 10 more. That's generally not worth. But again, they're in the same goddamn ballpark. But people are going to spend up on Kawhi. People are going to spend up on Butler. People are going to spend up on Jokic. People are going to spend up on Embiid. Not as many people will as should spend up on Lillard, who does have the chance to throw out an absolute beating here. So I'm probably a little more interested in playing Lillard than I am McCollum because it's a little more likely Lillard just ends the night for me. And it's just like, 73. Got there. Like, that is in the realm of possibility. I'm projected very close to 50. So it's not, again, points per dollar as brilliant a play as some of these other guys, but there's obviously a massive, massive ceiling there. Mo Harkless is fine for me in tournaments. Would much prefer on FanDuel. If you have exactly 4,100, I'm happy to go there. If you get up to 43 or 46, I would make the pivots as described earlier. On DK, I'd need to be a lot of lineups in to go with Mo because they're just going with shooters. Aminu, I'm a little more confident in, but I'm not thrilled with those prices at 54 or 47. I think he's a fine play. The ownership will be approximately where it should be for the price and the potential of upside and the floor. Again, his minutes were limited last game where he got 24, 25, some such. I'm fine with it. I don't endorse it. I don't hate it. If I saw Aminu, I'd be like, Aminu, interesting. Guys can be low owned. Go ahead. Enes Kanter, that number continues to come down. There is a chance of massive ownership here. He has been really good in this series, setting aside Jokic tackling him in a separated shoulder and everything, and fasting for Ramadan. Like that dude. Sentimental favorite for me. Not a great spot for him. I can see it going a couple ways. There is a very significant floor where his shoulder is particularly bad. He gets played off the floor, but you can get 25 and 12 out of Enes Kanter tonight, so I'd have some exposure in tournaments. I have Seth Curry and Rodney Hood for points per dollar. Pretty close. It actually varies site for site on DK. From a pure points per dollar standpoint, I would prefer Seth Curry and saving the $700 on FanDuel. Again, obviously they're radically different positions, or, well, not radically different because you're either the same position or different positions. There's no degrees of variation there, but they're different positions. Yeah, so, and approximately the same price, so, go with whichever there. I have them projected about 1.5 point difference. I'm not playing Evan Turner. It is not a particularly good series for his skill set at 2,600. I would prefer Monty Morris, who is our previous 2,600 winner. Congratulations, you can collect your prize at the ski shooting booth. Zach Collins, $4,400 on FanDuel. I will still very slightly Mason Plumlee in my life. But I have ranked very similarly. Obviously, do not play with Enes Kanter. I like him quite a bit on DK at $3,100. There is a big ceiling there where he plays 22 minutes and gets 27 fantasy points. That's very much in the realm of things in tournaments. I'm a big fan of Zach Collins at $3,100. All right, let's go to the tape. Show me what I missed. What did I get wrong, stat boy? Answering some questions. Lowry, you forgot about Lowry. Yeah, I know. That was Ibaka that took the elbow. Didn't I? I really didn't say Ibaka took the elbow. Obviously, I was talking about Ibaka and how I liked him and he lost. All right. I don't know what I said then, but yes, obviously Ibaka took the elbow. Do you like Simmons at $7,400 on FanDuel? I think he's fine in tournaments. Again, you probably posted that question previous to me discussing him in depth, but I'm fine with it. If you don't have Harris, Embiid, Butler, I'm more fine with it. I'm probably legitimately good with it. Why is Harkless getting so few minutes? 2 games ago, he had his minutes significantly limited by the fact that, again, I said all this, and you may have posted the question, so giving you the very brief version. 2 games ago, mostly as an artifact of foul trouble and poor play. If you look at him and Aminu, one of the reasons this team is struggling, and again, I projected the Trailblazers to beat the Spurs in 7, but I had Denver beating the Trailblazers in 6. And 6 always feels weird because you're calling for the closeout on the road, but hopefully we get there tonight. Still in line in my pool. I do a pool with other people. It's significant expenditure, 4 digits. Just project the series. Everyone who has or ties for the closest record splits the pool. That's kind of fun for me. I recommend you all try it. Would you want only one max of Collins, Harkless, Aminu per lineup and not have 2 of them in anything? Depends how many lineups I'm building. But no, I would not limit it that way. I would say, so again, to respond to that question, the reason Harkless' time has been limited is A, he's not been playing great. I believe Harkless and Aminu are collectively 5 for 26 from 3 this series. And that absence of scoring against a potent Denver offense just leads to more, all right, let's get Seth Curry and Rodney Hood out there, and at least we'll make some goddamn shots, because it's not like they're really stopping anyone anyway. Not unlike the Bucks' response to the Celtics' dominance of the Horford-Kyrie pick and roll, although nothing about Kyrie and dominance applies for a couple of games here. Murray and Jokic are making them work, and they've tried a lot of different things, getting any number of pairings. They had Aminu guarding both ends of it last game for a while. That didn't work particularly well, so just beating the shit out of them, and if you can't stop it anyway, let's put some guys on the court that can make some threes. Basically what it comes down to. I do think it is more likely than not that Harkless continues to see limited minutes to some degree or another. You think he rolled his ankle in Game 3? I want to say Game 2 he re-aggravated that thing, because Game 3 was the Gadumple overtime, right? I think. And he was, game time decision for that game, and then went out and played 48, I think was the number on Harkless, but James Ennis Cantor. That's a fine name for a baby. I don't know what that means. Untis. Oh, it's like a if you would repeat your question. Lowry or Simmons on DK and a GPP. Going to depend on other things. But basically, if I have none of the other 3 spend-ups on the 76ers, Simmons. If I have one, probably Lowry regardless. Simmons sitting at 46% ownership on FanDuel. Would you be significantly under that if not a fade? Yeah, I really haven't looked at the ownership enough. Let's do some refreshing before we get back to the questions. 12 minutes until lock. I will presume there has not been news of significance. I imagine I would come in under that. There are some more complexities to it, but not unlike the Embiid analysis. It's, lots of minutes, feels good. Closeout game, yeah, maybe he gets there, but lots of time against an extremely good defender against him. And just, I will say for the 4th consecutive game, my favorite 2 76ers are pretty significantly Butler and Harris. Simmons' price has come down enough, and I expect the ownership to stay, I expected the ownership to stay pretty low. 46 on FanDuel, which is high, by the way. I'm going to go ahead and disagree with, let me refresh this, but I'm going to disagree with some of our ownership here, just because to me it's more important to be accurate. Like, we have Kawhi at 46% on DK. That's low. That's going to be north of 60, or at least very close to it. But I'll put the Kawhi ownership at 63%. We have it at 46. It's going to come in over that. We have Lowry at 45. That's going to be a little under that. That's right. We have Simmons at 41. That's going to be a little under that. The price has decreased a few $100s, but let's look at what he was last time, where he wasn't that much more expensive. Hold on, I think I got a thing. This seems to be worth the time. Let's look at, am I logged in? There's a login. Okay, so let's look at ownership lastly, and I think that's going to be instructive. So I feel like garbage. History. I don't know if it's going to, because it probably finished after midnight. So confusing. But we'll click on a big, there's a 500K spectacular. Is it the right one? Yeah, it is. Okay, so here's the last giant tournament on DK a few days ago. Jimmy Butler was 51.5% at $200 less. I think he's likely in the same ballpark. Jamal Murray was 66%. Kawhi Leonard was 71. Paul Millsap was 55. Jokic was 55. Hood was 17. Seth Curry was 14th. That's going to come up a little bit after him getting relevant minutes again. But so actually, I can still export it. I can. So I will just look at this directly. But this is more important for looking at the ownership. And again, the point was that Ben Simmons, I have a feeling, was in the 20s. Ben Simmons was 18%. Okay, on DK in that tournament. He's not going up to 41 this time after failing again. I think the mid-20s is about appropriate. So I understand your question, but that's a better ownership number from which to target, in my opinion. McCollum or Murray? If you don't have Lillard, McCollum, definitely. In a vacuum, I'll slightly prefer Murray. Can you play CJ and Dame together on DK? You can. Can you play Gary Harris and Barton together without Murray? You can. Just got a GPA of 4. Fuck it, I'm playing it. Bravo to you, sir. Would you set a rule for Curry or Hood? Nope. They have almost nothing to do with each other. They both closed. They both got their 27 minutes last time. I would set a rule for Hood and Harkless or Curry. Like, you could think about doing that. But favorite Denver cheapie on DK? Plumlee. Barton, if he counts. I don't know if 4,300 is counting as a cheapie. I like Plumlee just fine. Redick 50% or Barton 46% on FanDuel. Again, Redick's going to come in under that, and Barton is going to come in over that. But I will generally play Barton in that case. Thoughts on Zach Collins? I like Zach Collins. We just did Zach Collins. Cantor or Millsap? Yeah, Millsap is a much safer play. There is a significant ceiling there, but he's going to be 62% owned. Cantor's going to be 20. So depends on what you're trying to do exactly. What do you think about Jokic and Millsap in the same lineup on FanDuel? I think it's fine. Don't use, Plumlee as your punt there. Generally, probably a little less interested in playing Cantor under those circumstances, but a little more excited about the second game anyway. And even on FanDuel, Millsap and Jokic just have the matchup. Which game makes for a good stack? I would probably go with the second one. The prices for me are a little more appealing. There's a few more value plays to take a shot at. And I think it's a little more likely it stays close. Is 50% Collins too much? Again, too much is relative. That's up to you. You're taking a strong stand. You will be several tiers over the field. I have no issue with it, but it's obviously risky. Ibaka on DK, I like him quite a bit. Again, I have him at 28 minutes. I feel like I might have sold him short a little bit. I think they stay big. I think they stay dense on the minutes. Thoughts on Gasol tonight? I still like Gasol at 56, I think is the FanDuel number, and 51 on DK. And again, my biggest reason there is that the minutes should finally be there, which we haven't been seeing. But he's in a shadow Embiid, and Embiid's minutes are going to be up. And even in that massive blowout last time, he played 33. I have him for 37. I think there's a chance you see 39. I mean, the matchup is obviously bad for him because just other guys have better spots on the Raptors, and Embiid's an elite defender, and he's just been really deferential this series. But he's still $5,100 and going to play, we'll say, 37 minutes. So yeah, I actually like Marc Gasol quite a bit, and thank you for reminding me that I did not say so in quite so many terms. Things. Twitter notifications. Alright, let's get into some of these. Let's get her done. Oh, my sister in there talking. Who are your classic 3 guys you're starting your lineup with tonight? I didn't know I had a classic 3 guys I started my lineup with every night. But generally, Jokic, I'm sure, is going to get on that list for me, regardless of site. Like, DK, for any sort of cash consideration, it's going to be Jokic, Millsap, Kawhi. I guess we'll go with on DK. FanDuel's a little stickier. Jokic. After that, there's no one that I feel like I'd be overwhelmingly consistent in exposing myself to. Looking at a couple more questions and getting in there. Lillard, McCollum on DK. Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with that. How confident are you in the Nuggets and Raptors closing the series tonight? I'm not super confident in either one. Obviously, everybody's on the road. We have, these teams have lost on the road. Other teams have a ton to win for. There's a bit of a cushion there. Like, there's I project them both to win those games. I projected both those teams to win those series, but I'm slightly more confident in the Raptors, who I'd have it like 60-40. Yeah. Curry and Lillard in the same lineup, FanDuel, yeah, that's fine. They play next to each other extensively. There's not really any correlation, and it's, Seth Curry is $300 or $400 over the floor on FanDuel. Going into the tank for some news for a second, just to make sure I haven't missed anything. We are about 3 minutes out. Can you play Ibaka and Siakam together on FanDuel? Yes. I would not say that they positively correlate in the traditional sense of the term, but you're on a 2-game slate, and that's going to give you a fairly unique lineup. Again, unique always a relative term, or a fairly differentiating lineup. I'm fine with it. It doesn't bother me. It's a little bit dicey. It's not your best point per dollar play, but I'm just fine with you going there. All right, we're going in the tank. Let's see what we got. All right. Second monitor, full screen these alerts, get the tweet deck up and running. Doug Smith, one of my favorite Raptors reporters. The adjustments to the adjustments to the adjustments to the adjustments have both the Raptors and Sixers starting the same players. Yes, I correctly diagnosed Kevin Durant's injury. I had a couple of people clap back at me like, "Oh, you're a doctor now." It's like, no, I've just done it, and I've seen other people tear their Achilles, and you're almost always bursting forward because you tear your Achilles because it's that thing on the back of your ankle, and you pronate your foot. You make the angle between the front of your shin and your foot a little more acute, and the sucker snaps because it's basically a big-ass rubber band. He didn't do anything that would do that, so he jumped straight up, landed, and started walking that way, and then went, "Ow, my leg," and it's like, it's a really weird way to tear an Achilles. Obviously, it's possible. Dude's playing, 40 whatever minutes. He's not that young anymore. He's 30 or what have you. So, sure, maybe on the jump he did it, but I was like, that just seems a little unlikely to me, and shockingly got there. That is also very kind. I appreciate the praise, although I would say for the record that we're recently through National Nurses Day and National Teachers Day, and I'm sitting here in front of a computer talking about basketball and getting paid to do so, which is one of my favorite things in the world. So that may be a bit more praise than is appropriate. Appreciated, but it's I am not a single parent working 3 jobs to pay for my kids being able to eat, or just much appreciated, but maybe a little heavy. I don't see any significant overlay. Thank you for the reminder there. Always something good to check out for. Things. Yeah. So yeah, I'm also excited for that $2.5 million tournament, although nobody's winning $1 million. It'll be really interesting to see how many ways the first prize in that sucker splits. That sucker's going to split that first prize a couple ways, but that will be definitely something I'm interested to see exactly how that goes as well myself. Contests have started. All right. Let's see what we've got. We'll go to FanDuel first. We will see if my prognostications on Ben Simmons were accurate. But yeah, I thought 46 is well too high. The $400,000 shot. Ben Simmons, 34.6. So higher than I thought, but under the 46. Basically between where I and the algorithm had it. Kawhi Leonard, 56. Tobias Harris, 28.5. I'm a big fan of that on FanDuel. Like, you can get 50 out of Tobias Harris and you get up on 72% of the field. That's pretty exciting for me. Siakam 45, Ibaka 29 feels right, Redick 30 feels right, Danny Green 36. I probably would have tried to get away from that under almost any circumstances possible. On FanDuel where he's almost $5,000. Kyle Lowry 36. That's fine. Marc Gasol 22. I'd feel pretty good about that if I had Marc Gasol. Like, people are stacking the hell up on Jokic, and there's some Embiid in there as well, and a little bit of punting, but you're going to have 60% Jokic, but 22% Marc Gasol on FanDuel feels pretty good. On DraftKings, this thing, and something. What do we got? $555,000 Jiminy Cricket. You can buy some church-going socks with that kind of money. Live. Downloady. One dicey game. Kawhi game down pretty significantly. Kawhi Leonard, last time, for same price, right? Price didn't move on DK. 95 and 95 last two games, I think, right? 92 the one before that. Anyhow, last time, 71% owned. Today, 56. That number took a tumble. I said I thought it'd be in the low 60s. I was wrong. It looks like I had about the rest of this about right. Kawhi Leonard 54% rather. So +1 reading comprehension for me. Number 2, Jimmy Butler 48. Yeah, see, like, that's just a number. Number 3, 35 for Tobias Harris. It's about right. Pascal Siakam 33. That's too low. Kyle Lowry 31. That seems right. 25% Joel Embiid. Like, that's what I was saying. That's just too the hell high. Ben Simmons 23.5. Okay. JJ Redick 21, Danny Green 20, Serge Ibaka 20, Marc Gasol 19.5. Too low. James Ennis 10.6, Mike Scott 8.3. I'd like a little more than that. Fred VanVleet 3.03. Finally was not abject and total garbage in the last game, but also got some blowout time. And again, I think I have it 11 minutes tonight. Norman Powell 1.3, Greg Monroe 1%. Alright, 1% isn't crazy. Like, I worry about his time. I think Embiid gets whatever minutes. I think Scott's more likely to be there, but 1%. He could go back to 20 minutes and score 30. I'd want more. 1%. Jonathan Simmons, 0.12. Boban, 0.12. TJ McConnell, 0.9. Amir Johnson, 0.7. Furkan Korkmaz, 0.5. Jeremy Lin, 0.4. Jonah Bolden, 0.3. Shake Milton, 0.02, Pat McCaw 0.1, Jody Meeks 0.1, Malcolm Miller 0.1, Zaire Smith double odds, Eric Moreland double odds. Nobody played themselves, although I don't think you actually could. So there we are, my friends. I would say 60-40 I actually end up being back tomorrow for that one game slate. I shall post on the Twitter during the day. I am off to get some more hot tea and probably take a nap. So, best of luck in your contests and bon chance.